Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about Tangzu Audio's FuDu Verse 1. So this, of course, says Tangzu on it. The other one does say Divinus because this is a collaboration between the two companies. And these are the Divinus or Divinus tips. I'm not sure what the correct pronunciation is. But anyway, the shell is actually quite nice in all black. Faceplate. The back is, I think I would call that a smoked. You can semi-transparent. You can almost make out the dynamic driver there, and you can see the two vents there, and kind of a flush 2-pin here. So very nice, attractive, nice fitting shell, kind of a standard looking shape, just in a classy black color. This is the Divinus or Divinus tip, the velvet tip, so you can kind of see what that looks like on the side. If you look at the other shell, it actually does have their name on it as well. So pretty cool. Kind of attractive looking shells. Of course, what's special about this package is it actually includes the Tangzu Audio Tang Sankai tips. So you can kind of get a look at what those are. You can kind of see the ridges there, the textured side. Kind of an interesting tip. Yeah, I'm not a huge tip recommending type. I think you have to really try them and see how they fit in your ear and on, for your ear shape and all that. I think it's very hard, and I think they did a pretty good job of including two sets of tips that people can try on their own and figure out which one works better for them. But I do actually like the velvet tips. I think they for tips that I've never heard before to be included in the package, that actually worked out pretty well for me. It's not something that doesn't really happen every day, but yeah, I do happen to like the Divinus tips. Cable is a 4.4 black 4-core, so we can kind of see that they actually included the 2-pin standard, which matches the shell, so you don't get the huge gap right there. So very well, good job on the matching. And this is the 4.4, which is kind of standard looking, but pretty cool. They included a 4.4 as well, or I think 4.4 is the only version that they included, so I think that is pretty cool. This is the Tangzu zippered pouch or case, so quite nice as well. I mean, I think they did a really nice job for $90, $89. I think they sort of nailed the tip selection, classy looking shells that fit well, zippered pouch, cable. I think all of that is very right on for the price and probably better than what you're typically getting at that price point. So let's jump into the graph real quick. We won't spend a ton of time on the graph, and I think that the majority of what you need to know about the graph is actually this tilt, right? It's a little bass heavy. They brought this down. It's a little bit relaxed. It's got this nice little bass focus for bass fans, people who like a little more bass. Bring that up a little bit, tilt the treble down a little bit. You can turn this one up quite a bit. But yeah, it's sort of centered right here, and it's going to be a bass-driven set for fans who like that type of set. If you like a treble heavy set, that's not exactly this. The tilt is kind of the opposite of what you're probably looking for, something that would be like that. So yeah, we'll maybe talk about the graph in a little bit, but probably not, because there's not a whole lot there. A lot of it is what I just mentioned about the bass-driven sort of tilt to it. So, and we'll kind of start there and just say, continuing on from Chang Li, I think Tangzu is very good at these general appealing tunings that have a little bit more bass to it, a little bit more warmth to it, a little bit thicker. I think they are very good at that popular style sounds. Works great on popular music or any genre that can really handle a little bit of warmth and thickness. I think they kind of nailed that sound. Their house sound, at least on those two sets, I think did that very, very well. And I would call it sort of with reviews, it gets really confusing when people say, I really love this set, it's a great set. There is this preference of do reviewers really like very treble heavy, thin, light, that style of fine dining sets versus comfort food, which is more what FuDu is. It's this thicker, heavier, richer, more grounded in the bass style sets. And I think both style sets can be great and good if they are done well. And FuDu is a really good example of sort of what this comfort food, this thicker, warmer, a little heavier in the bottom end set sounds like. And it's done very well. And I think Tangzu again, I think they just kind of nail that type of sound. And on this one, I would say there's a difference between bands and voices. I think fine dining, tends to work better on those acoustic, solo, when you're just listening at very specific parts of tracks, whether those are vocals like Diana Krall, or, a guitar solo or something that's you're really critically listening for very specific parts. And then there's the sets like FuDu, which are I just want to turn it up and listen to fun music and enjoy myself for a while. And that's exactly what verse 1 is. So I will say it sounds better. It's more in its sweet spot on Metallica and AC/DC versus Diana Krall. That big, heavier, wall of sound style is what FuDu actually does very well. And it'll do Diana Krall okay, but that's not. I think there are other sets that will handle female vocals or an acoustic guitar better. This one is definitely more of a fun, loud, big sound. So there's nothing really pushed here. Like I said, I'll go back to the graph that I said I wasn't going to go back to, but this sort of style of this low rise, it rises just a little bit earlier but lower. So this, the 4K, that's sort of debatable. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the rest of this stuff isn't really pushed all that hard, especially compared to Harman. This is, a little bit of extra bass, but they didn't really push a whole lot of energy or over-energetic version of Treble at all. It's very relaxed, unpushed, and that works very well in this style. But I think the downside of it is it worked at lower volume. It can sound just kind of a bit okay. It doesn't really stand out at low volumes. You really need to push it into kind of the medium and a little bit over medium volume, and it has a little bit more fun. The treble rises and it will kind of fall in place, and you'll kind of hear it the way it was supposed to be as it was tuned. I think at lower volume it sounds, it's not quite there. You have to click the volume a couple times, and when you hear the treble fall in place, you're kind of right there. So I think there is a huge upside to not pushing everything and not putting a ton of extra energy into the treble, but the downside is it's just a little bit more impactful with more volume. So sound-wise, I do think, pre-Harman takeover, before we had so many Harman sets, before we had the planar wars, I think we had a lot of V-shaped, shouty, metallic treble style sets. That used to be what the sub $100 hybrid sets used to sound like, and that described pretty much most sub $100 hybrids like that. So I'll say HBB's collaboration with Blonde, that Z300, FuDu, a more modern take on that style, that V-shape sub $100 hybrid style, even though HBB was only a single dynamic driver. But the sound style, this sort of V-shape without having a big upper V where you just have a lot of bass energy and you turn the volume up a little bit and this falls in place and it ends up sounding kind of like a balanced V is sort of what both sets did very well. And sort of bringing back that fun bass style without the abrasive treble and doing it with better drivers the way FuDu did. I think dynamic driver and the two balanced armatures actually work really well here. I would say it kind of going back to this old KZ ZSN Pro, which was a one balanced armature, one dynamic driver, big V-shaped set. I think to bring that into 2023 in a more modern sound where it doesn't have that abrasive treble, but it still has a fun bass that anyone can pick up and enjoy, I think that's what verse 1 actually does quite well. Like I was talking about, the tip battle, so I think Tang Senkai versus the Divinis tips, I actually chose the Divinis tips. I think they fit a little better for me, lift the upper range a little bit more, and it just sounded a little bit more open for me, so I actually stuck with those. I think it's a very nice set of tips. So versus Simgo's EM6L, which was another recent hybrid, I think Simgo's house sound lives in that upper mid-range, and I think FuDu, Tangzu, like I said, I think their house sound, this general appealing sound, tends to live a little in the lower mids, and it's just a little bit of a more warmer sound. But do notice, like I talked about with EM6L, going from EA500 to EM6L, they actually went in the same direction. They went in that more relaxed, a bit warmer sound. But similar to EM6L, I think this one isn't technically pushed in the same way that EM6L wasn't actually all that pushed. The balanced armatures and the dynamic drivers work together, and they really hit that price point, resolution, detail, and extension. But it's really not pushed in your face, and it's not overdone. It's just kind of a more relaxed, natural version of hearing detail and resolution and extension in this signature. As I said, with EM6L, these sets are really setting the bar for what a nothing wrong preference set hybrid sounds like at sub $100. So EM6L with a little more upper mid to it, this one with a little more bass to it. Two different preferences, two different target customers, but these are miles better than what older $100 hybrids used to sound like. So bass level, I think this one is familiar, a very familiar, fun. The bass shelf is quite fun. I think the driver does handle it really well. The shelf hits genres that really need that foundational bass to drive a track like rock and pop and EDM and even soundtracks. And I think movies is sort of where you there's a little bit of, division between the two. If you like a very note heavy, very defined notes, and that's how you like your classical music, that's a little different than what I would say that this set does. I think this set does what the other people like. You want a soundtrack that sounds more like the movies. You want the bass to rumble and really come up from the bottom and shake your ear a little bit and still have a nice treble so it actually sounds big and open. That's exactly what I think verse one does actually very well. And I think the same thing for rock and pop, that bass line that drives some of those tracks, I think it actually does that very well. This level's definitely very appealing, and if you are bass critical, it's maybe a step too heavy for something like Go-Go Penguin. If you're looking for an equal distribution among, and level among instruments and players, I think that's where you notice that this one does have a little bit of a tilt to it, and the drums are going to be a little bit heavy, especially if you are bass critical and you're looking for something that is a little tighter and faster. This is more fun, more impactful bass with weight, and I think that's the difference between this set and a lot of other recent sets, is that it has a lot of weight to it and a really nice impact to it. And same thing as EM6L. I think a warmer source will push it a little bit too thick. Unless you really like that, then it's all good for you. But where EM6L had an 8mm dynamic driver, I sort of said I wish it had a 10mm so it was a bit more impactful. That's exactly where FuDu Verse 1 sort of hits the sweet spot. Is that impactful, weightful bass that was sort of missing on that set. So yeah, I sort of welcome to hear that again. So the mids, I think the lower mids are the anti-Harmon tuck. They're a little bit heavier and a little bit weighter, really bringing back male vocals that have depth. I think Enter Sandman, Smells Like Teen Spirit on high volume mids, I think it actually does those well. And a lot of it goes back to that weight and impact and having the bass be able to drive those tracks. Impact and depth that was missing from so many recent sets, like I just said. On the females and the upper mids, again, really not pushed. It rises a little bit early, a little bit lower, just not overly energetic, and it needs some volume for female vocals to really hit their mark. If you're used to Harmon style energy, this is kind of a notch or two lower than those guys. But in one sense, I do think that this style of signature is a throwback to not really caring what reviewers think and putting a set that can be enjoyed by anyone out there, similar to the way BL03 and Chang Li, in that way. You could just give it to anyone, pick it up, and whatever genre they listen to, it'll pretty much sound reasonable and enjoyable and engaging and fun, closer to listening to what your favorite tracks sound like in your car with the bass +2, as opposed to, this thinner, lighter, this fine dining style, treble heavy, a little brighter. I don't think there's a whole class of people who really like this BL03, this heavier, warmer. I think that appeals to lots and lots of people in the same way that it did for BL03, and Chang Li was very much the same way. And FuDu Verse 1, I think, is just right along with those of a set that can be picked up by anyone. And it's actually, you don't find that every day, and I think Tangzu is sort of zoning in on what that sounds like and what they enjoy listening to and what music styles they listen to that sound well on a set like this. So treble, again, smoother presentation over that balanced armature biting edge. if you're looking for a very technical, sharp, very sharp note definition, that's not what this one is. This one is a smoother presentation. Again, not pushed hard to sound too sharp or too technical. Like the bass, if you are very note critical, if you're really looking for those super sharp notes, this one is kind of a bigger picture set, creating a sound signature that is appealing to what Tangzu likes, how they like to listen to their music and genres, and a ton of people who appreciate that style as well. I think the set appeals to all of those people. If you are a very critical listener, this one is sort of at the other end, at the other side of just really enjoying music. Extension that goes far enough with some volume to hit the stage height as it should be. I think they did that actually quite well. The 4K bump is kind of a mystery to me. Not really sure if it is flattening the stage or limiting the volume. It's certainly better than a 5K, but I think it is just a little bit noticeable, especially when you turn up the volume. And one thing that I talked about with Z300 is that Z300 actually takes a flat path right through from like 2 through 4 or 5. And bumping it to 4, I think it does sort of counterbalance with the bass. I think you do get some clarity in the vocals, but not the piercing 5K clarity to the vocals. It's kind of different. You don't see too many sets that actually bump the 4K, and it's really just bumped up to the level that other sets would be at. If you took like a normal 5K peak would be about, up here into the above 70, between 70 and 75, whereas they took a lower path through the pin again and just bumped up the 4K a little bit up to where it should be. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting tuning choice, and it's really hard to figure out if it's flattening the stage for me, or maybe it's a volume limiter for some people. I think it's a little bit of both. But, I do think it's certainly better than the 5K. So stage, I think they definitely hit the width and the height mark, which is what most people will notice. I do think the bass hits low and on the stage, which is something that you hear on some sets. Some sets, you hear the bass kind of right in the middle of the stage, and it kind of clouds things up. This one tends to hit a little bit lower, which is actually pretty cool. And it does give you just a slightly cleaner version of stage if the bass tends to be a little lower and the vocals tend to be higher, and there's a lot of space right in the middle, and that's exactly what verse 1 does. Fun sounds, which keep it's a fun sound which keeps the separation, the layering, and the imaging right for the price point, and really setting the bar of what $100 sounds like. Again, like I said, I think not a super technical set. I think all those things are right in line with the sound signature. I wouldn't complain about any of them. I think they all kind of fall out of exactly what the tuning was. And they're done very, very well for the price point, like I just said. So that's what I got on FuDu Verse 1. Very nice one. I think certain people will be very much attracted to this sound. Other people will probably wait for their next one, which is Gate. And that one is sort of the more upper range treble guys, super extension. I think that will be a mid-5 set that appeals to a different set of people. But for now, we've got Verse 1. And again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.